All right, welcome back to the Buying Sandlot podcast. I am Kyle Scott, founder of Buying Sandlot. On today's episode, we have John Stewart, the founder and CEO of sports tech company Fastbreak AI. So we recorded this episode in October prior to the announcement of Fastbreak's 40 million, that's 40 Series A investment round. For those who don't know, Fastbreak is only a couple of years old and got its start by offering an AI scheduling solution for pro leagues. But that was just the start. Fastbreak has rapidly brought its tech down market into youth sports, and it's bolting on other solutions like registration, event management, ticketing, sponsorships, and more. In a world where fragmentation rules and where many established players think consolidating many services across many sports will be hard or downright impossible, Fastbreak thinks it has the strength and tech to dominate the space. This isn't John's first rodeo. He sold his first company, Map Anything, route optimization software for sales reps and service providers, to Salesforce for a reported $250 million. Needless to say, this is a great interview and a must watch or listen for virtually anyone in youth sports or sports tech. But before we get to it, I want to take a second and plug our Buying Sandlot Summit, a 2-day youth sports business conference, which we'll hold in Philly next April 14th and 15th. The event is designed to bring together youth sports owners, operators, and investors from across the country. This will be a high-end event, the likes of which this booming $70 billion industry has not seen. Stay tuned to Buying Sandlot for details. Be sure to head over to buyingsandlot.com to subscribe to our newsletter for free, and we'll keep you updated on early bird tickets, sponsor, and group ticket opportunities, all of which will be available soon. On to the interview with John. All right, John, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Kyle.
Why don't you give a little bit about your background and the founding of Fastbreak before we get into it?
Sure. I'm a multi-time entrepreneur. This is my third go-round, starting and being the CEO of a company. My prior company was in the Salesforce.com ecosystem. We were a field sales, field service, route and schedule optimization company. Ultimately, we sold that to Salesforce in 2019. Started this company in July 7th. 2022 was the idea behind it was to use the same principles we use the area of math, which is called optimization research. It's a combinatorial mathematics science and apply that to sports scheduling. So always been an entrepreneur through my career, and this is just the latest evolution of that.
Talk about why sports scheduling needed that sort of computational power in the first place. Because I know I've read the article probably 100 times about the old, I'll start here at the example. A lot of people probably heard about the old like husband and wife duo used to do the Major League Baseball schedule by hand.
Interleague play really killed the ability of the Stevensons to do that. Before that, every road trip combination could be sort of figured out. After that, it could not be, the series at least. But there, we refer to things as like a solution space, what's in this, how big the solution space is. There are more possible solutions than there are sort of grains of sand on a beach or atoms in the sun, right? It's some ridiculous number that my co-founder would be able to rattle off. These problems scale exponentially. It's really, really complicated, because you have so many competing parameters and so many stakeholders. You think about professional sports leagues. There's stakeholders, there's the arenas, the teams, the players, the media rights partners, and then just the core issues of balance and fairness as well that have to be accounted for. I mean, the problem growth is, the problem grows quite large, quite quickly. And so, a lot of the science that we've developed, the machine learning or AI, as machine learning is now referred to, that's applied has to do with efficiently solving those problems or simplifying the definition of those problems so that they can be processed in an economical fashion.
Explain what on day one or early on, a few years ago, what Fastbreak was offering as a product and service. And then maybe some of the, I know you're going into youth sports and we'll get to that, but like talk about how the product and service has evolved. Give people an overview of everything it does. Because I think I've talked to a few people in the space and they have a general idea, but I've never got like a good 3-sentence answer from someone who could tell me exactly what Fastbreak does. And I think there's more there to meet the eye.
Well, part of that is probably our market positioning. So just to be very clear, we have 3 lines of our business. We have a professional line of business and its products, an amateur line of business, which is where youth falls in those products, and a brand business, which is for consumer goods and brands to activate amongst our partners or customers. So there's three legs of the stool for us. So we do have this sort of halo effect that we use to go to market. At the highest level, the idea was we built, most scheduling in sports was as the Stevenson did it. It was consultants who have been doing it for years and did their best to make schedules. Honestly, they weren't very good schedules because you're very limited. The human beings can't think in that many simultaneous dimensions with that many trade-offs. The idea was to take what had been traditionally consulting projects and turn that into a software SaaS platform. That was the big sort of unlock to be able to scale a business here. Ultimately, we first engaged with the NBA as a consulting project. We helped them figure out how to actually make the in-season tournament work. That was 2022. That was some of those things were the foundational principles that we used to apply to our solving engine. Through 2023, we actually built the product and started bringing it out to the market. Well, we actually started from the day we formed the company, but in 2023, we brought it to market. So our first customer that came on board, our first major league customer was June of 2023, it was the NHL. And then from there, it just sort of grew. And honestly, the more complicated the problem, the better we excel and shine because of capabilities, feature function, et cetera. We knew we always wanted to get down in the youth space. Having professional sports leagues is fantastic. We have north of 50 of them as our customers. These are the largest professional sports leagues in the world by far. But it's a relatively small market. By the time you get to the 100th largest sports league, it's not a significant amount of revenue. So it's hard to build a scale of business if you're just working on professional sports. Yet we always were going to do this. So this wasn't a pivot. I could show you the investment decks from way back in 2023 when we first raised capital, and it was roadmap. We were always going to make this directional, enhance the direction of the company with attacking the youth sports marketplace. Now, our big theory of the case is one unified platform, one unified data model that we're building around. Youth sports technology is extremely highly fragmented. Okay, as you know all the players. Every need has another solution for it, and it's probably only a solution for one sport, right? So if you even think about scheduling, the quote unquote leader in scheduling, and none of them are really scheduling, not the way we think about it, but the leader in scheduling for volleyball is AES. For tourney machine, the leader was, they're the leader in baseball, et cetera. Same thing for registration, same thing for video streaming. Video streaming, if it's high school sports, it's Huddle. If it's hockey, it's Live Barn. If it's baseball, it's Game Changer. It's Feed the Beast and Baller TV for basketball. Like, you literally have to pick a segment for you to sort of know who's sort of the pole position at this moment in time. So our idea was, look, for the event operators, the people running these large scale youth tournaments, or even some of the smaller scale youth tournaments, they're dealing with 6 or 7 different pieces of software to run their system. My background is in enterprise software. My prior company was, I sold to Salesforce, so I'm used to that. Our idea was, let's make the ERP or the operating environment for that event operator. So now we can give them a single solution for, his e-commerce, his payments, his registration, scheduling, scorekeeping, ticketing, travel, and sponsorship. And by the way, from the scheduling standpoint, we're the greatest sports scheduling software company on the planet. Just ask the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball, right? So we get to leverage that IP in that platform. So that's how we position. That's how we go to market.
So it's a pretty impressive growth trajectory in just a few years there. Talk about that a little. Like, I just want to double click on this. Like, how do you sort of so early on get them as clients? And are you doing for some of those leagues, now the full schedule, or is it still projects like?
So we don't do the schedule, so to speak. We provide a software platform and they create it themselves. So very clear. So we are a SaaS platform, basically. And really, what's neat about this problem, it's so complicated and so difficult to solve. We had a technology that could solve it and solve it really fast, and therefore we win, right? And it's one of those things where all we have to do is prove it. And this is such a challenging problem and a complicated problem. They're happy to let us prove it. And once we do, it's, we get them as a customer.
What are some of the unique challenges? I want to get into the differences between pro and youth and all the other services in youth, but what are some of the unique challenges, particularly at the pro level, that was just really difficult for humans to kind of square?
You have so many competing stakeholders or interests in a professional sports schedule. If we're just going to use the NBA as an example, there is, of course, arena availability. That's one set of stakeholders. There's the teams where they have preferences themselves. The teams are a set of stakeholders. There's the media rights holders. If you're going to spend a couple $1 billion on media rights from a league, you're going to get a few requests here and there. And so there are those stakeholders. And of course, viewership being the number one driver on that. There's the players themselves. Another good example, the CBA, right? Like per the CBA, the players have restrictions on, certain playing patterns, that they've negotiated for player health and safety reasons, and those are fair. And then you couple all of that with the end of the day that you still need a fair and balanced schedule so that every team has the opportunity to excel and succeed. That's a lot of different requirements that are constantly in tension with each other. And that right there is what drives the combinatorial nature of the problem, or the way it exponentially grows the solution space. That right there is the biggest challenge on doing these problems. And ultimately, you have to produce a schedule that's playable, that's fair and balanced, that the teams are going to be equally unhappy with, because no one's ever happy with their schedule, so equally unhappy with, and that is going to drive good ratings, right? Because that's how these leagues drive the value of their media rights deals. So, and we're a part of that.
Did it matter just putting in all of those, sort of rules, for lack of a better term, and prioritizing which takes precedence over another and letting the machine do its thing? Or is it more
Pretty much. That's exactly how our software works. It's a system where various stakeholders log in, put in their requests, their requirements. The league itself defines the constraints or the rules and preferences, and then they push a button and we produce answers.
It's awesome. What are some of the unique challenges then? Let's get into the youth. What are some of the differences? You have different stakeholders with youth sports and tournaments. You have parents and players and facilities and things like that. What are the unique challenges? And again, I keep using the term rules. If there's a better term, let me know, that make youth so different. Constraints, yeah.
Sure. For youth, it's different for sure. A lot of times, if we take a look at tournament scheduling, there's some very common ones that are cross sport, right? So, and then there's some ones that are specific to certain sports. So the most common one you see for youth tournaments is that shared coaches. So two different age groups can't play at the same time because they share the same coaches, the 14U coach and the 16U coach. More importantly, even if they are a shared coach, or even if they aren't, a lot of times these tournaments take place over multiple facilities. So you have to consider the facility gap and travel time between those facilities to be able to make that work. And then again, you have some teams, hey, I'm flying in from California. I'm not going to get there till 1 a.m. Please don't give us the 6 a.m. game. Or I have to catch a flight back. Please don't give me a game after 4 p.m. on Sunday. And then a lot of times it's pool play into bracket play. So you have to be really careful about strength of ranking. So one of the things that we're eventually going to do is we're actually building a ranking system, which I know a lot of people have tried, but we're data scientists. We're working on, I'm okay to say this, but we're literally working on the international ranking system for Taekwondo right now. We're going to apply some of that down at the youth level. We'll have to figure out how to capture data outside our system. But that itself is making sure the matchups are proper, because it's not any fun for a superstar team to get a team that's not, let's just say, is common. And it's not fun for either team. It's not fun for the kids getting blown out. And it's not fun for the kids that are dominating, because if they're going to these tournaments, they want competitive play. So these are all a bunch of factors that we have to consider. There's court restriction and field restriction. By age group, sometimes the fields or courts or ice are different. So you have that consideration, offset start times. And then, of course, if it's outdoor sport, you have to do all this while the facility is open, because they may or may not have lights. So you can see, even though it's a youth problem, there's all of a sudden, wow, there's a lot of that even goes into that. And unfortunately, most of these folks have nothing. They've had tools that let them manually sort of put games on a grid, but nothing that actually does it for them that will simultaneously take advantage of all of this. And then rest pattern disparity. Like, it's no good if you're doing a tournament where team A plays a game and then immediately has the back-to-back. At the same time, no one wants more than 2 hours between games, because they don't want to have their first game at 8 a.m. and their last game at 5 p.m. and sit in smelly gym all day.
So yeah, it seems like the as the constraints increase, the number of possible outcomes is just exponentially. I'm envisioning the chart in my head, and it's going hockey sticking very quickly there.
And the greater the number of teams, the more complexity there is. And so that's really where we get to leverage a tool basically subsidized by multi-year contracts with professional leagues, built by 6, 7 PhDs on my professional staff, that engine. We get to bring that down to market, and we basically more or less give that away as a function of doing the rest of the things that we do for the tournament operator, like the registration and their electronic ticketing and their travel business.
Okay, so you're using that scheduling fees very much as the door into owning larger parts of the stack. Talk to me about the competitive balance one. That one's really interesting because I've had a few conversations in the last couple of weeks of folks out there trying to quantify more on the individual athlete side, but a little bit on the team side. How much do you have data from pre-tournament, right? Obviously, you guys can collect the data from the tournaments as they're happening and be able to kind of stack one team against another. But what does that look like if a team's coming in from California and they're not in any of your systems anywhere? How do you square that?
So if they're not in any system anywhere, the tournament operator can actually give them a rating. The first thing they do is they ask the team, and the teams, which is fine, but truthfully they lie in either direction. Either pretend they're not as good, or they're not as bad, right? We usually suggest that, look, it's in the day and the age of the internet, you can sort of find out information on somebody, but typically, silver, gold, bronze, or tier 1, 2, and 3, or a number of stars, or whatever system you want to use, they can put them into a bucket. And the good news is, though, you'll figure out real quick whether or not they deserve that ranking after one tournament, as long as they're playing people that are ranked. So that can sort itself out fairly quickly. It's hard to do this based off, and it's funny because at youth sports, a single player can actually shift something that much. It's really hard to do that off without having the player data. Now, over time, we should have a database of players where we can actually start doing some of that. It's a matter of data, but we certainly have the data scientists to build that for at the individual player level as well.
Right. You basically need the tech to do it because there's so much turnover and change in youth sports. It's not, even in pro sports there is, but if the Lakers are good for 3 years, like it's less volatile than the really good, the ringer 14-year-old leaving the team and they go from good to bad in a hurry.
They'll do that in the middle of a tournament. Like in grassroots basketball, you'll have one player literally change his jersey at halftime and play for the other team. That's happened.
My son's soccer team, they're 7, by the way, and his travel team played a kid from a team from Philly last week. We're out in the suburbs here, and the best player. And then we went and played the Unions, Philadelphia Unions team the following week. The same kid was on the team. We're like, how is that possible? So yeah, that totally makes sense. Talk about Fastbreak Connect, right? That's the sponsor and activation platform. How does that fit into everything you guys? Just talk about it in general, and then we'll kind of go to how all the pieces fit together.
Right. So look, for a long time, brands have been wanting to figure out how to activate into youth sports, but they're really not set up or situated to be able to do it in any manner that returns any type of engagement ROI. So what we do is we act as sort of a clearinghouse. We work with the brands. We understand what their targeting demographics are, right? And what's great about youth sports is we can actually use it as a micro-targeting mechanism. So if you want to for example, reach Latino females, I can put you in soccer tournaments in Phoenix, Arizona. If you want to reach, let's say, for instance, true story, you have a $300 mouthpiece with biometrics in it, a mouth guard rather, $300 mouth guard, because you want to measure impact and acceleration and its health monitor. Well, it's fantastic, but you have to have a very specific demographic to be able to afford a $300 mouth guard. We typically will put something like that in a Mid-Atlantic lacrosse tournament. So you can actually use the sport and the area to actually target who your ICP is. And that's the value that we can bring to the tournament, to the brands. And the other thing is, what is a youth tournament? It's an hour of excitement, 2 hours of boredom, and an hour of excitement. So unlike any other time in their lives, the kids aren't glued to the phones. They're sitting there anyway. They're bored. They'll actually engage with the brand. So we can do fun engagements. We can get a lot of social. So we bring value to that brand. And we can use our inventory of tournaments as a place to deliver this. That's on the benefit to the brands. They're getting real value for their investment and their money. Their real engagement. They're getting real data. The value to the operator is, well, these operators, these tournaments aren't as lucrative as someone might think they are. They're very expensive to operate. Most people have no idea. Go to a basketball tournament, every game there's $150 in referees on the floor. Think about how many games are going on. And they don't get paid by the hour, they get paid by the game. Same thing with that floor or field. So they're super expensive. And so if you want to keep the price of participation low for the athletes, these operators have to subsidize their income in other places. And so if I'm showing up to that operator and we're bringing them sponsorship dollars and we're delivering that through our platforms, either whether electronic ticketing platform, on-site engagement, our hotel offering, uniform, whatever the case may be, they can keep the prices cheaper while still maintaining a margin that lets them operate. Remember, they're doing this for a living. This is how they feed their family. We provide another basically revenue source for them. And it's a win-win-win. And look, even if they want to do sponsorship by themselves, it doesn't work because on the day of the tournament, they don't have the time to be handing out 2,000 free bottles of some sport energy drink. When it's been tried in the past without someone like ourselves doing a turnkey facilitation of it, it's been basically a failure for everybody and no one was happy with it. By us being the traffic cop, managing delivery, managing expectations, handling the actual activation, delivering the data, this problem is solved.
You basically just described what's going on, or what goes on in the media world. I've been in media for 15 years, and it's the same thing. Like, there's this constant tension between, do you charge people to access information and news content? And some larger papers and niche brands are able to command a premium. And then on the flip side, it's like, okay, or you can subsidize it with sponsorship. And it's sometimes those things are in balance, right? We have a paid audience and we have sponsorship, and we try to marry it as best as you can. And it sounds like the tournament space is very similar in lots of ways.
It is very similar in that regard. And actually, I think there's a net benefit because look, again, if the organizer actually wants to keep his price low because he'll get more participants in his tournament. And that's their business model. It's registrants, right? More people participate, more people to buy merchandise, more people to buy concessions. It's no different. He's providing a surface. And again, for the brand, it's relatively short money, so to speak, and they get a high value for it.
What are you seeing on the macro level with sponsorship in youth sports, in and around tournaments? I mean, we've been chronicling it in the newsletter, and it just feels like there is so much momentum in the space. Like, by the day, it becomes the sponsorship piece, the NIL opportunities, the brand dollars seems to take up a larger section in our newsletter, like on a month over month basis.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are certainly a lot of people chasing the athlete on the NIL stuff. I'm not sure that's healthy for a variety of reasons. I mean, you're taking their activity, which they should be doing for enjoyment and development, and potentially turning it into a job. And I'm not sure that's fair to the kid who might be 12 or 13 or 14. So I'm not a big fan of that part of it, but I do understand that the economics have created a situation where that has to be the case. My ideal situation, if the opportunity presented it, I would love to help an operator basically have his entire tournament funded by brands. And I don't care if we logoed everything up from the t-shirts, the court, to every last thing that there was there, but the kids all got to play for free. That would be amazing, right? I don't think anybody would care. But I do think there's going to be an opportunity like that or two coming up where it's like, if you can drive enough brand sponsorship, you can engage with the athletes and provide an experience for them without them having to fund the dollars. Because I do feel like there's becoming this socioeconomic divide on who can afford to participate in these things and who can't.
Yeah, so much of the conversation around youth sports really centers on the haves and the have-nots and the widening gap there, and it's really interesting to frame it that way, with sponsorship being a way to sort of square that. Are you seeing?
We actually did that for a tournament. So there was a tournament in Maryland, Rising Stars, and we work with Adidas, and I would say half the teams at that tournament, we got Adidas to pay the full registration fees for, so the kids didn't have to, right? That was a win-win-win. Sponsorship, the tournament was sponsored by Adidas. That's a win for them with engagement. The kids got to participate and didn't have to play, and it didn't completely crush the margins of the operator. And believe me when I tell you, running a soccer tournament, that is, with the premium the fields, is super, super expensive. Right?
Are you seeing brands, bigger brands? I know you guys are relatively new with Connect, but are you seeing the brands have a bigger appetite for this now than maybe they did a year ago, or certainly 5 or 10 years ago? Like, how fast is that tide moving?
Well, at least with the brands that we engage with, we can make a very good case. You think about the amount of money that a brand uses, for example, in digital. Like you have a podcast. So you know, when this podcast comes on YouTube, what's going to happen? There's going to be an advertisement, right? From your own personal experience, how fast do you click the skip button when you watch a video?
I pay for the premium on YouTube, so I don't have to see them.
All right. You pay for the
But
premium.
yes, no,
Generally
for
speaking,
that reason, because I don't want to wait for
you
the skip
immediately hit
button.
skip, so you don't have to watch it. Think about all the digital advertising that goes on. Like, go look in your Outlook email box and tell me, how do you go into the junk mail or the promotions with all the no, you don't. So the reason I'm bringing this up is this: when we go to a brand and we talk to them, they have so much invested in digital, and you ask them why they're doing it, and it's, well, it's engagement, it's brand recognition, et cetera. And my whole thing with them is, well, it's phony engagement because no one's really engaging with you online on that. They're just skipping past it. We're digitally overwhelmed, right? It's noise at this point. It's literally noise. We can give them a much better value because we can authentically engage with the brands on site, right? With the athletes, and that will create a better impression. And you can still get the reach. I will give you an example of this. We did an engagement at a lacrosse tournament. We radar gunned, so there's like a radar gun booth where all the kids and the 12 to 16 year olds, and so of course they want to do this. How fast are they throwing the ball with their stick, right? Like, of course they're going to do that. And then of course they turn into a contest, and who's got the fastest throw, and where you read the speed is covered with the logo of the brand. And so they're taking pictures of it and posting it up on Instagram. Well, what kind of reach are these micro influencers going to get them? And what do you think they're remembering from the engagement? Like, that's real. It can't be clicked through. You're going to get sort of natural take from that. Now compare that to just doing another digital ad campaign or buying some more ad time on YouTube TV or Google, or I don't even know because I've never actually bought any of it, how that works. Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, you don't sell me on it. I mean, as someone who, again, skips over ads, but I mean, it's the story of media in general now. And again, it's sports, it's live sports, but for lots of brands, it's so expensive. There's a reason why it's haves and have nots in professional sports rights. A lot of brands just can't afford to be on an NFL broadcast as much as they want to be, and it's not targeted. So you need the giant brands, the Toyotas of the world, that could spend tens of thousands, hundreds, millions of dollars to sponsor something, but you're not able to really. And still, even then, people are tuning it out. This is the thing. I think if you look at the inflation in sports rights and how it's like just propping up live television, I think it's great. But over time, those ads are getting a lower ROI as more and more people just look away at their phone when ads are on. You've seen it with pro sports. They're thinking about ways to integrate the advertisement into the game, where in between plays, they cut away. They're still live, but the brand's there. The announcers are talking about the brands. Saw something really cool in Philly this year. They wanted to show one of the closers' entrance, and it would normally take place during a commercial break. So they got a local law firm to sponsor not going to break, so they could show the closer and his entrance, and all the lights came down. It's like, okay, that's only so many brands can do that. But meanwhile, you have millions of kids and parents at fields for the entire weekend. And it seems like such a way where you got a captive audience where people generally don't want to be on their phones at those things. I mean, they are, but their heads are up.
Yeah, they got a captive audience. And more importantly, think about this too. It's not just the athlete, it's mom and dad, and more importantly, mom, who makes almost all the purchasing decisions with both the non-discretionary and discretionary income in their household, right? So that's why we saw the opportunity. It lets us provide a value add to our event operators. We bring them sponsorship dollars. There's another reason for them to use our overall technology stack, and on top of great software and an unbelievable scheduling capability. And we can holistically bring a solution that helps them run a more profitable business. Well, if they're running a more profitable business, they can keep and contain the costs, right? I know, people get itchy about this, but at the end of the day, it is still a business. And if they run it well, there is a positive impact, not just, from a cost inflation standpoint, but also an experience standpoint. It's a better experience for their customers, which are those kids.
Talked about the scheduling piece, talked about the brand sponsorship and connect piece, kind of glossed over there some of the operational products and services you guys offer. So why don't you explain a bit more about what you offer? This area of the space is a little bit more competitive, fragmented, lots of pieces people are using. Who do you guys see as your competitors? What is kind of the main one or two pieces of the product and service that you guys lead with?
I compete with everybody, so I compete with nobody. right? So we do, I mean, it's the same as when a team says, we're very excited about our quarterback situation. We have 3 quarterbacks on the team. What are they actually saying? We don't have a quarterback, right? If you've got 3, you've got none, right? And the way we see it is, look, we provide a platform for the event operator. Now, that platform does their website, their registration, their e-commerce, their registration, and their payments. There are 10, 20 registration and payment companies. There's 20 e-commerce companies for that piece. Okay. So who do we compete in all of that? Well, I guess we're competing with all of them there. But since we also do the scheduling and the tournament operations, well, there's 7 companies that potentially do scheduling. None of them can do AI scheduling like we can. So that is a technical advantage. But there's no registration company that also does the scheduling. So I've got those pieces. Let's talk about ticketing. You go to the volleyball or basketball tournaments, you got the tickets. I literally have a spreadsheet. There's 49 companies on there that offer electronic ticketing, right? But they're separate platforms. None of them are tied into the schedule automatically, right? The schedule or the registration. None of it is tied together. Same thing for travel. There's 19 sports travel companies. Our sports travel platform is actually built into the registration and the scheduling and the ticketing platform. So I can offer the operator a single data stack as opposed to him having to we rattled off 5 logins he'd have to have versus 1 login, right? There's power in reducing friction between data, and there's power in the ability to what we can do across that platform. And that's really what we bring to the table. And then we lace our sponsorship into it. We use the ticket platform to deliver sponsorship. We use the schedule to deliver sponsorship. We use travel to deliver sponsorship.
Seems to be the holy grail in a lot of ways in youth sports, is getting a critical mass of.
We go into next year with 1,000 tournaments on our platform. All these tools didn't exist last year. The way to look at it. So we actually only started putting out these products in April and May. Was the first time we saw revenue on any of these products, individually pieces. We go into 2026 with over 1,000 tournaments all signed up to use it because there's such a need and demand on it. And truthfully, no one can compete with us, only because what is their answer for the other 5 things that operators need? Because no one is providing a complete platform.
Yeah, it's a finished question. I guess I was going to say, what's the marketing, the sales process like for that? Because the holy grail here is you get an operator who is able to own the full stack of tournament or event operations, and it makes sense. Like everything you're saying, it makes 100% sense. The other challenge is like reaching all of these individual operators. Obviously, we have a lot of them buying Sandlot. I'd be happy to talk to you about advertising, but how do you how do you guys think about, like, all right, how do we go out and find these people? Is it really using the scheduling piece, which is probably the most unique part of this, as that loss leader to get in there and say, hey, we can layer on all this stuff for you, and that's where we'll make our.
Hey, Kyle, I see you're running a 300-team basketball tournament this weekend. Good news. We have this brand that would like to come activate there. What we're going to do is we're going to show up. We're going to set up. We're going to give your kids a great experience. We're going to hand out some prizes. We're going to run some contests. And if you let us do that, we're going to give you X number of dollars. Can I come do activations at your tournament this weekend? What are you going to say to me? All right. What do you want to know by Monday the following week?
How much you made?
No. How do I get this for my next tournament, right? So these operators, they do multiple tournaments. They do one every weekend in some cases, or they do one a month, but they generally run between 4 and 20 events. So our whole thing with them is we try to lead with sponsorship, because our message, it helps resonate. It helps drive home this message. The message it drives home is, if you partner with us, we're going to have a positive margin impact on your business. And so we've established that trust because we started our relationship by bringing them sponsorship dollars, and it goes to, let me show you how we can lower your operational costs and all these other pieces. And oh, by the way, solve your scheduling problem, and then create additional lines of revenue with either through Swoop Media, where we're doing revenue share on the pictures and the videos, or hotel travel, where we have what we call a stay to save model. Now, stay to play gets a bad rap, but the way we do it is we contractually make sure that the hotels that we work with, they keep the price $5 to $10 lower than the parents can find an Expedia or Priceline up to 10 days before the tournament. And so we're actually can save them money. But then, we do revenue share on the hotel rebates and commissions. So again, it's all about helping them improve their operating margins, keeping their costs, their customers lower. And that's sort of the message. So we actually have sponsorship as a lead into the initial conversation that we have with a lot of these operators.
We go back to them and say, okay, you saw what we can do, but if we come back, we want to work with you here, here, and here.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of this is a start of the relationship. Let me start this relationship instead of a sales pitch, which there's no issue with that. That's fine. But we don't have to start it that way. We have a massive amount of inventory that we have to place in our customers' events with sponsorship, and we use it as a tool.
How difficult are the switching costs there? Or is it like, hey, like
We can
we're
switch
going to,
someone. We're modern technology. We can switch someone in a weekend, literally.
what do you see big picture um, in the next, let's call it 1 to 2 years time frame? What major trend, just outside of fast break and product and service, just kind of what you guys are seeing on the ground, what you're seeing on the ground? What do you see as some of the big picture trends in youth sports over the next year or two?
Big picture trends in youth sports over the next year or two.
And you could sub category that around events, because that's kind of the bread
Yeah,
and butter.
that's our bread and butter. I mean, all these events seem to keep getting bigger and bigger and getting more professionalized. Everything is more professionalized, from the ticketing to the fact that these places are selling streaming rights, and you might like, you know, my mother, my kid's grandmother can log in and watch their games. I just think a general professionalization. I think some of that is because of the money. I mean, look, you've written all the articles. I read your newsletter. I mean, how many times do you bring up PE money coming into space? That is a global trend in youth sports. So as a result, there's going to be a level of professionalism that comes along with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of why I pushed back a little bit on the previous comment. I mean, from what I've heard, you guys have great product or service, and the sales strategy and the sales pitch is excellent. But one of the challenges I've heard just from so many people, and especially among the PE folks and some of the investment bankers I've talked to, or the VC folks even, who are newer to the space, and they're just coming in with money and saying like, okay, we can get instant scale, we get venture level scale, and this is going to be easy. And then I talk to the operators who've been in the space for 20 plus years in some cases, and some of them are definitely like stuck in the old way of doing things. But almost to a man, I always hear it is so hard to consolidate because this sport has an edge case, or this region has an edge case, or this event we need to address this, and we just don't quite have that offering. And the bottom line I keep getting there is, yeah, fragmentation, like consolidation's great and it makes sense, but it's so hard without that ground game to address all of these edge cases at once. And that's why I was kind of pushing back, like, this all sounds great, but like, how do you overcome that and be able to be standardized for volleyball in the Midwest and basketball in the Northeast and all the differences that lie therein?
I think probably because we're not PE, that the flaw in the model is the PE is coming in with money and they're buying up all the technology companies and partners or programs, and they're slapping it together and they say that makes a company. That's not a solution. Slapping 35 products together does not make a platform. I mean, you've seen some of the consolidations that take place, and there's some fine people in those companies. I'm not going to name numbers, but you're smart enough to know about some of the collection of software companies that have come together recently. That doesn't make a solution because you've done that. In fact, that creates a huge amount of technical debt that you now have to consolidate. So those PE companies can't get ahead of the cost curve because now they have, instead of a company with one product and a need, now they've got 10 products with 10 dev staffs, with 10 sets of legacy data issues, with 10 sets of go-to-market motions. So it doesn't scale that way because of the fragmentation and the needs. Whereas our approach was, look, we're built from scratch and we designed this outcome from day one, whether it was the way we designed our software around the data scale, or the way we were very, very specific about attacking the one thing that we knew that we can do better than anyone else in the world, which was the scheduling, and then starting to wrap the services around that. We knew that, we could glom onto that for the event operator. And then if we just kept building the ecosystem and needs around that, we could capture that business. But if you're PE and you're just trying to buy the parts, you're no different. You're just, now you own all the individual parts as opposed to having a platform or solution. So I don't think, and maybe I'm wrong, but as far as I can tell, I think we're the only true platform player out there. And we certainly built every piece of it ourselves. We've done some acquisitions, but those acquisitions, we haven't kept a single piece of technology from any of our acquisitions. We bought know-how, we bought customer lists, we bought distribution models, but we did not buy, and that's the flaw in the PE model. They're not operators, they're simply buying the parts. It's not a 1 + 1 = 3 model with what they're doing.
Yeah. It's bigger for the sake of big. How do you think about like data portability, APIs, and things like that? I mean, there's, as you know, so many, whether it's parents, coaches, obviously we talked about event operators and organizers, but there's so many apps and programs
I
and
would,
pieces of tech people need to use, and you guys are going to have data on teams, right? And that's to me truly unique. Not the schedule piece unique, but having that competitive level data feels like it would work nicely in an API and a whole lot of places. Do you guys want to keep that, or do you want to be open so you can integrate with? You're not going to have everybody, integrate with others. How do you think about that?
I think that there's 16 sets of privacy laws around the country. It started with the CCPA, the California Child Protection Act, and now there's 15 other states who have emulated laws about that. And I think sharing data outside our data policy and protections and all the compliance that we've invested heavily into doing is a risk that I'm not willing to take on.
Maybe not necessarily player and personal data, but like team rankings, things like that, event schedules, stuff that's less privacy based.
Right. Okay. In that case, yes, we do have a strategy for public feeds. I mean, we're going to start creating our own publicly available ranking system. We'll put out on Swoop, our Swoop API, our Swoop AI website when we start, which is going to be our consumer facing brand. So Fastbreak AI is basically a commercial brand. Swoop AI is sort of a consumer brand. So we're going to feed that there. I mean, we're not opposed to sharing that type of data, obviously, or licensing that type of data. But you do have to be super careful because this is the data that belongs to minors. It's not a little thing to share data that you've collected on people from the ages of 13 and over, or under 13 to 18. They're so restrictive now. There's so much liability in it. You got to be really careful.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think about, again, it's kind of maybe outside what you guys do, but I feel like you'd have an opinion on this one. If you don't answer, that's fine. But like a lot of the video streamers and video platforms, they have this inventory, they have the more or less the rights to these games, and they're thinking about selling sponsorship on top of it, which they can and should. But I heard left out of a lot of those conversations is like, all right, how do we cut the team or the player in the video in? When you watch pro sports, those teams and leagues are obviously getting a chunk of they're getting paid for those rights. It's almost different in youth and high school. You're paying the provider to do X, Y, or Z, and then maybe they're able to monetize on top of you. Do you have any thoughts there? Because I know there's like some pass back and some, rev sharing, but it's not top of mind in lots of those.
It's not top in mind. There's no clean way to do it. I mean, that's one of the reasons that that's not an area we're ever going to go chase down. Hardware is hard, all right, and that's the number one issue with the streaming platforms is you got to figure out the hardware issue. And then after that, yeah, there's the rights around what can you do with that image, right? Have those athletes sign the waivers. Do you know that, right? If the brand is now paying for it, are they signing up for the liability around whether or not that operator or that streamer has collected the proper release waivers for putting a minor on the internet in a video? So like I don't know how they're going to solve that problem. It's one that makes my head hurt, and I think I'm pretty good at sort of managing the chaos and all the moving parts. So it'll be interesting to see how that one shakes out. My opinion on that particular part of youth sports and space is that I will stay away from it.
This is why I'm bullish on the compliance companies. We work with a couple of them as sponsors, but I feel like, okay, they're in a good business for the next little while here. What's on the last little bit here? What's on the roadmap for you guys, short term, medium term, long term, and what's an ideal outcome for Fast Break 10 years from now, 5 years from now? Like, how do you want people to view it? Where do you think you're at?
5 years from now, 10 years from now, Fastbreak AI is synonymous with with sports technology. If someone says sports tech company or sports AI company, it basically is no different than saying Fastbreak AI. That's how we'll know I'll know I did my job, is if that's the connection people make, right? That would make me very happy. So that's sort of the process. We're going to build a big, strong, durable company for our investors, our employees, and our customers, and their customers ultimately. And I think that's good for the overall health of the ecosystem as well. What was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's short term, medium term, and long term. So I think you answered the long term aspect. What's like more near term? What are you guys looking to roll out? You mentioned maybe like the rankings, I think, through Swoop. Anything else?
The rankings for sure. Share? Obviously, there's some things that we're going to do around ticketing I think will be valuable for youth with regards to doing background checks inside the ticket, i.e. facial recognition with against sex predator databases. So it's funny, all these schools have these controls. You go to the school and there's a control to get into the school They ID you. They keep you in that sort of that man cage until you get cleared into your kid's school, and all that and security. Of course, it's a high school. No, unless of course it's an athletic event, in which case come right in and here's your for $5. Here's your ticket, right? Well, no, there's the world's not necessarily a safe place all the time, and they're one of the big things we're focusing on our ticketing platform is using that as a with facial recognition, being able to compare that against offender databases to make sure that someone who should not be around children by buying a ticket are not around children.
Yeah, maybe that's one of the API examples I could have used before about, kind of that piece. I mean, we do work with someone who's in the space, Stewart's, and I'm sure you've seen them, but, same idea. And I know they're thinking about their API. I mean, do you think there's a world where there's integration between different companies and products and services on that piece? So, hey, it's like this gets flagged regardless of which tournament operator software you're using.
Yeah, for sure. Like, look, and I'm not opposed to APIs. Look, my whole career was around it. It's not so much the APIs and what we make available and in terms of sharing data. It's what data is shared and how is it shared, right? And again, you follow the space, you know what's going on here, you know the compliance laws, right? You got to be really, really careful with minors' data, more so than even you or me, right? As adults.
John, why don't you plug for the audience how they can find out more if they want to follow you? You're usually pretty active on LinkedIn. I think I see your stuff quite a bit.
I'm definitely on LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me, by all means, anybody in the sports space, I will connect right back with you. The company, you can find us at www.fastbreak.ai, and on the consumer side, swoop.ai. And we look forward to having you reach out and talking to you.
Awesome. John, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Kyle.